In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, July 18th, here in South Korea. The latest tally shows at least 50 people have been killed or remain missing amid the most recent downpours, and weather forecasters say more rain is in the forecast nationwide later this week. Officials here in Seoul and their counterparts from Washington opened their first session of nuclear consultations today aimed at bolstering extended deterrence against threats by Pyongyang via information sharing on nuclear strategy. Russia officially backs out of a deal brokered by the United Nations and Turkey that allows Ukrainian grain to depart Black Sea ports, fueling fresh concerns over food and fertilizer supplies worldwide. At least 50 people have been killed or remain missing amid the latest torrential rain here, and authorities have launched a probe into the tragic underpass flooding in Osong. Our Shin Ha-young reports.
Torrential rainfall during this year's monsoon season has resulted in lost lives and damage to infrastructure. According to the latest data from the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters, as of 11 a.m. Tuesday, nationwide, 41 people have died and 9 are still missing as a result of the recent weather. In addition, 35 people have been injured while over 12,000 have evacuated their homes for safety, and the monsoon season is not over yet. Another body, presumed to be that of a missing person, was found in a river in Yecheon-gun County, Gyeongsang-buk-do Province, where a large-scale landslide occurred due to heavy rain. Authorities are currently verifying the identity of that person. The latest victim not yet been added to the official death toll from the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters, but the number of deaths in Yecheon-gun County has now increased to 10, with 7 still missing. At the site of the flooded underpass in Osong in Cheongju City, Chungcheongbuk-do Province, one more body was recovered, bringing the death toll from that flash flood event rising to at least 14 at 8:10 p.m. on Monday. Search and rescue efforts inside the tunnel came to an end on Monday night. However, considering that the most recently recovered body was found in a grassy area near the tunnel, the authorities plan to continue the search outside the tunnels, such as along riverbank and in fields. The Office for Government Policy Coordination announced on Monday that they have started an investigation to determine the cause of the tragic incident in Osong. Authorities confirmed that 1 to 2 hours before the tragedy took place, there were 2 emergency calls to 112 requesting the emergency evacuation of residents and emergency control of the underground tunnel. Landslides have also been a cause for concern during this monsoon season. Nationwide, 195 landslides were reported between July 6th and July 17th, mainly in Chungcheongnam-do, Jeollabuk-do, and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And President Yoon Suk-yeol has pledged to allocate taxpayers' money to relief efforts amid the recent rain-related tragedies. Speaking at a cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday, the president called for priority to be placed on disaster response with regard to available resources, including government funds. The remarks follow his designation of special disaster zones in regions where the repercussions of the rain have been particularly painful. President Yoon also called for a revamp of the nation's disaster response system as extreme weather phenomena become the norm, highlighting efforts to usher in a new digital mechanism in the near future. Beyond the national tasks, he also touched upon the latest diplomatic advances on the security front between Korea and NATO, underscoring the importance of broader collaboration between Asia and Europe. Also on this Tuesday, Capital Seoul hosts the inaugural meeting of a nuclear consultation body between Korea and the U.S. established under the Washington Declaration. Our senior presidential correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
South Korea and the United States are launching their bilateral dialogue platform to coordinate nuclear responses to North Korea's growing security threat. On Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol spoke at the inaugural meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group in Seoul, with the first quarterly session to address information sharing, consultation mechanisms, joint planning and execution of nuclear deterrence against North Korea.
제1차 한미 핵 협의 그룹 회의는 강력하고 실효적인 한미 확장 억제를 구축하는 중요한 출발점이 될 것입니다. 핵 핵 기반의 새로운 패러다임으로 업그레이드된 한미 동맹을 통해 북한의 핵과 미사일 위협을 원천적으로 봉쇄하기 위한 실체적인 노력들을 전개해 나갈 것입니다.
The NCG was formed as part of Presidents Yoon and Joe Biden's Washington Declaration in April, after North Korea launched an unprecedented number of missile tests last year, and experts warned that a seventh nuclear test could be imminent. Amid growing concern over the North's fast-evolving capabilities, and with recent public opinion surveys finding over 70% feel the need for South Korea to develop its own nuclear weapons, Seoul and Washington agreed in April to bolster their joint capabilities and confidence in executing the US extended deterrence policy of defending allies who fall under conventional or nuclear attack. While Seoul does not have nuclear weapons, the NCG would allow its participation in Washington's nuclear planning and operating process, differentiating the group from other dialogue bodies such as the Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consultation Group. This could help reduce strategic gaps and response time in nuclear crises, bolstering credibility and cohesiveness between the two allies. While critics say the NCG falls short of nuclear sharing or shared control of US assets, such as under NATO's own arrangement with Washington, others deem it an important window into Washington's planning and decision-making. On that note, a senior presidential official in Seoul told reporters that South Korea's involvement in NATO's military intel sharing system called BICES could provide crucial insights into its own exchange and use of information with the United States. Underscoring its importance, the NCG talks have been upgraded to the level of vice ministers, with Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-ho and White House Indo-Pacific Coordinator Kurt Campbell co-hosting the session on Tuesday. 오수영 아이랑 뉴스.
And South Korea has rebuked recent remarks by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong. The foreign ministry here on this Tuesday claimed her comments regarding Seoul-Washington military exercises as provoking Pyongyang are a pretext for advancing hostile weapons ambitions. Stressing that Pyongyang is legally required to surrender its nuclear weapons technology under the United Nations Security Council, the ministry condemned the regime for its deceptive pursuit of weapons of mass destruction, despite agreeing to abandon them in the past. Accordingly, the ministry urged Pyongyang to halt such hostility and to return to dialogue and diplomacy. Fears over global supplies of food and fertilizer are mounting as Russia backtracks on a deal that allowed grain to flow from Ukraine to parts of the world. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
Despite weeks of negotiations, the deal that was brokered by Turkey and the UN almost a year ago to allow more than 30 million tons of Ukrainian grain access to global markets officially expired on Monday. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres shared his disappointment at Russia's decision to step away from the deal.
I deeply regret the decision by the Russian Federation to terminate the implementation of the Black Sea Initiative, including the withdrawal of Russian security guarantees for navigation in the northwestern part of the Black Sea. This initiative has ensured the safe passage of over 32 million metric tons of food commodities from Ukrainian ports.
Despite Russia's decision not to renew the grains deal, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in a video message on Monday stressed that the deal was in agreement with Turkey and the UN, adding his belief that the agreement remains in effect and hinting that Ukraine may continue its exports despite the deal expiring.
The Black Sea Grain Initiative can and should continue to operate. If without Russia, then without Russia. The agreement on grain exports is an agreement with Turkey and the UN, and it remains in effect.
The expiration of the deal may deal a major blow to both Ukraine and countries that rely heavily on Ukraine's grains. Ukraine is one of the world's largest grain exporters. As of 2021, before the Russian invasion, it was the third largest exporter of barley, fourth largest corn exporter, and fifth largest wheat exporter worldwide, with 95% of that grain moving through Black Sea ports. Speaking at the White House on the same day, National Security Council Coordinator John Kirby called Russia's decision an act of aggression that will harm people all over the world. Before the deal was signed last year, global wheat and corn prices soared 56.5% and 15.7% on year respectively, heightening food shortages in low-income countries. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, Seoul Central Bank is sounding the alarm over ballooning household debt here in Korea. That is reportedly the third largest among major economies. Our Moon Hae-ryun has more.
As of last year, the household debt to GDP ratio in South Korea was 105%. Among 43 major economies, this was the third largest after Switzerland and Australia, the Bank of Korea said on Monday. The BOK pointed out that the high profitability and stability of household loans, as well as insufficient regulations on them, as the causes of the increase in such debt. Financial institutions have been providing a relatively large amount in these loans compared to corporate ones, as they have lower default rates and higher profitability. According to the BOK, the impact of the increased household debt on financial stability has been limited due to the large proportion of high net income borrowers. But there are rising concerns that over the longer term, it could hinder economic growth and widen asset inequality.
The financial sector can become very weak because if the economy slows down and many of these families can no longer pay back the debt, then some financial institutions may become insolvent.
To reduce household debt, the bank said it was necessary to use macroeconomics and monetary policies that are especially focused on financial stability. It also suggested revising current loan regulations such as minimizing exceptions to the debt service ratio, or DSR.
DSR was effective in limiting the growth of household debt. It wasn't completely successful in reducing household debt, but combination of increasing interest rates and DSR ratio probably did much to keep household debt growth in check. Now, if the government loosens up the DSR regulations and households take more loans, then there is a possibility that households will take much more loans than they can afford.
According to data from the Bank for Intentional Settlement, Seoul's DSR was 13.6% last year. This is the second highest among 17 major economies after Australia, indicating a greater debt repayment burden compared to income. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
On an optimistic note now, Korea saw its largest exports of K-pop during the first half of this year. Data from the Korea Customs Service on Tuesday show the value of K-pop album exports during the January to June period amounted to nearly $133 million, up 17.1% on year, and the highest for any half year. Neighboring Japan was the top destination for K-pop exports, followed by the US, a clear indication of K-pop's growing influence there. Meanwhile, K-pop girl group Blackpink has set yet another record on YouTube. The group's label YG Entertainment on Monday said the number of subscribers on Blackpink's official YouTube channel has surpassed 90 million, the most in the world. The milestone was reached 7 years and 1 month after the channel was launched, and also comes about a year after the group hit a record of 80 million subscribers last September. BTS follows in second place with over 75 million, and Justin Bieber stands third with over 71 million. The recent rampant rain here in Korea is being linked to climate change, and pundits say extreme weather phenomena are looking to become more prevalent across the world. Our Eun-jin reports.
More countries around the world are experiencing climate events caused by extreme weather conditions. South Korea reaches a 10th day of heavy downpours being called water bombs, which have caused flash floods. Such conditions have caused devastating landslides, flooding of underground infrastructure, and overflowing rivers as the death toll continues to rise across the country. In neighboring Japan, just over this past weekend, the country saw some 414.5 millimeters of rain, an amount over 2 days that was greater than over the entire month of July in previous years. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, June was the hottest June globally in the 174 years of records kept by the agency. The United States was scorched by record heat in the west and south, while the northeast was lashed by rain, causing floods, and the Midwest was choked by wildfire smoke. California's Death Valley, that's been dubbed the hottest place on Earth, reached 54 degrees Celsius on Sunday. In coping with such extreme heat and in preventing climate-related deaths, countries in the Middle East like the United Arab Emirates have imposed restrictions on working outdoors between 12:30 p.m. and 3 p.m. Health ministries across Europe have issued red alerts, and with temperatures reaching 40 degrees Celsius in Greece, access has been closed to several tourist destinations like the Acropolis Monument. As El Niño returns for the first time in 4 years, which typically increases global temperatures in the year after it develops, the World Meteorological Organization has said there is a 98% likelihood that at least one of the next 5 years and the 5-year period overall will be the warmest on record. 이은진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Cows emit a significant amount of methane, a harmful gas that aggravates climate change, and a research team here is seeking to address the dilemma by changing cattle feed. Our Chonju has details.
Abnormally high temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius and above were seen this year in East Asia, Western Europe, and South America. South Korea has also seen unusually high temperatures. Spring flowers bloomed early due to the warmer climate, and in May, the east coast city of Gangneung saw temperatures reach 35 degrees Celsius. Global warming is causing this extreme weather. Carbon dioxide and methane are the more common greenhouse gases that cause global warming. Methane, in particular, is more potent than carbon dioxide. Although only a small amount is emitted into the air, its greenhouse effect is 80 times that of carbon dioxide.
Methane has been rising at a record level for 3 consecutive years since 2020. As of 2022, methane concentrations have exceeded 2.5 times pre-industrial levels.
The combustion of coal or LNG gas emits methane, but the amount that cows release is also huge. Cattle regurgitate and rechew their food. This is known as cut chewing. Microorganisms in the intestine produce gas during the process of decomposing food, and this is released when cows pass wind. The main component of this gas is methane. One cow emits about 280 liters of methane per day, equivalent to the daily emissions of a car. Worldwide, cows emit around 1 million tons a year, accounting for 18% of total greenhouse gas emissions. For this reason, countries worldwide, including South Korea, are making efforts to reduce methane emissions by introducing eco-friendly feed.
Among the substances researched for reducing methane, the most effective is known to be the red sea plume, a species of red algae. It's known to reduce methane generation by about 80%.
The South Korean research team plans to promote a pilot project to reduce greenhouse gas production by 10% through low methane feed in Jeju Island by 2030 and gradually expand it nationwide. 정은주, 아리랑 뉴스.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. We shift our attention to Greece now, where hundreds of residents of the coastal towns near Athens were forced to flee from a wildfire on Monday. The blaze broke out in the village of Kovaras and affected nearby villages in a matter of hours. On the same day, a second fire near the capital prompted the evacuation of some 1,200 children from a summer camp alongside residents of a rehabilitation center. A third fire in a forest 30 kilometers from Athens also broke out. Firefighters, military personnel, aircraft and helicopters are currently tackling 81 fires across Greece. The wildfires have been blamed on strong winds, soaring temperatures, and a previous dry winter that has created tinderbox conditions. Turning over to Western Australia, where a mysterious large metal cylinder has washed ashore. The object was found by local residents at Greenhead Beach over the weekend. Authorities have since confirmed that the object is not dangerous, but have asked people to stay away from it. According to experts, the copper-colored cylinder may be a fuel tank from an Indian space rocket. The cylinder is said to be around 2.5 meters wide, up to 3 meters long, and is thought to be less than 12 months old. It also appears to have sustained damage, with a large tear at the bottom. Australia's military and its space agency are among those working to confirm the object's origin and nature. And finally, a neighborhood in Florida is dealing with a number of furry invaders. As many as 100 lionhead rabbits have taken up residence in the suburbs of Fort Lauderdale. They were allegedly illegally released by a local breeder who has since moved away. But the rabbits are ill-suited for life outside in Florida, and their thick fur is not well adapted for Florida heat. Local residents are trying to raise up to $40,000 needed to bring in a rescue group that will capture, neuter, vaccinate and shelter the rabbits until they can be given proper homes. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's forecast to be another day of soaking downpours with heavy rain. Mountainous regions on Jeju could see more than 450 millimeters of rain. The south coast could see up to 350 millimeters of massive rainfall until tomorrow. And through tonight, southern regions in the south of Gangwon-do province will see rain hammering down. Concern is on the rise as torrential rains will be dumped on already soaked regions. A heavy rain warning remains in place across the south for the 5th day in a row, and violent winds are expected for the south coast and Jeju along with that heavy showers. The capital will see rain tapering off as the day goes on with an expected high of 27 degrees, about 4 degrees higher than yesterday. The south are seeing highs going down 4 to 5 degrees lower this afternoon, hovering at 27 degrees Celsius. Rain continues to drench southern regions in Jeju tomorrow. Then monsoon rain returns this weekend. Well, while rain takes a break up north, sizzling heat sets in. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And that ends our Tuesday afternoon newscast. Thank you for watching, and do stay tuned for our panel session coming up next.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Federico Cuello. I am the ambassador of the Dominican Republic in the Republic of Korea. Arirang is the one channel in which ambassadors have a say. Ambassadors' opinions are taken into consideration. Ambassadors can promote what they are doing. I am truly grateful to be asked to speak for Arirang. I hope Arirang continues and Diplomat Talks continues as well, because really it is the one window in my 6 postings as ambassador I have found to speak about my work and to speak about those issues that are of relevance for the Dominican Republic and for Korea. And I look forward to coming back as many times as possible during the remaining time I have here in Korea, resonating with the world with Ariran.
Loved and watched around the world. We want to make more animations to reach more children. Traveling time and space. Developing adventure and curiosity. Infinite creativity and hope. We want our children to grow up to be happy. K-Animation, watched by children all around the world. So that joy can be felt when our animation is watched. This is the reason we make animation and share with the world. K-Animation, befriending children all over the world.
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. You excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
Earlier this year, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services acknowledged the achievements of Reverend Eugene Cho with the Outstanding American by Choice Award for his contributions to combating hunger and poverty. The award, established back in 2006, applauds the advancements of naturalized American citizens.
Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Reverend Eugene Cho, a recipient of this year's Outstanding American by Choice Award for his efforts to ease the plight of people. Reverend Cho, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Right, Reverend, let's begin then with your response to this recognition. What were your immediate thoughts upon hearing about the award?
To be honest, at first, I wasn't quite sure what the honor meant. I thought it was something that was a surprise in many ways. And certainly I was incredibly honored and privileged the more that I heard about the honor. And that news came from the White House here in the United States. But the moment that it really began to sink in very deeply was when I was at the White House to actually receive this particular honor. At that moment, I couldn't help but reflect back on not just my own life and journey, but to reflect upon my parents and my grandparents, the stories of my ancestors and family lineage. And I was overwhelmed by emotions, by pure gratitude for the grace that has been bestowed upon me. So again, I am so honored by this particular honor.
Right, so Reverend, you were honored for your contributions to easing the plight of people. Could you walk us through the events that paved your path, perhaps, to seeking an end to hunger?
Yeah, there's multiple reasons why this has been a life calling. It's not something that I'm trying to do in this season. It's not a clothing accessory that I wear because it's fashionable. It is something that is very, very important to me. And there's probably 3 reasons why it has become such an important calling, a conviction in my life. First, without sounding too preachy, as a minister, I'm a follower of Christ. As a Christian, I believe that my faith, as I study the scriptures, it shows that God has a deep conviction about those who are hungry and poor. And so that's the first reason why this is so important to me. The second reason is that nearly 30 years as a pastor, you begin to hear the stories of the people that you serve, not just in your particular church, but in your neighborhood and in your city as well. And as a result, the stories of those who struggle with hunger and poverty have become very personal. And then lastly, I would say that it's my family story as well. My father was born in what is now called North Korea. And it is hard to hear some of the stories that he and my mother endured as children of the Korean War. And so as a result, it has been very, very personal for me. And that's the reason why the fight to help end hunger around the world has become so personal.
Right, and staying with that, Reverend, you are now engaged with the Bread for the World, which you lead at the moment. Could you tell us a bit about this organization and its more notable feats, perhaps?
Sure. I have been serving as the president and CEO of this organization now for about 3 years. It was founded nearly 50 years ago, and a group of religious leaders got together and they said that there were so much issues of hunger and poverty, and they were doing all that they could to help alleviate hunger, but they realized they needed to get to the root causes of what creates hunger around the world. And so Bread for the World is a Christian advocacy organization urging our lawmakers here in the United States, and then also partnering with other organizations around the world to urge their lawmakers to do all that they can to help end hunger, both in the United States and also around the world. Just last year, in October, we helped work on a legislation called the Global Malnutrition Prevention and Treatment Act. One bill, one legislation. We took about 3 years working on it, but this one bill that was signed by the president will have the opportunity, the possibilities of impacting tens of millions of women and children around the world. This is just one example of many of the significant victories that Bread for the World and our members all around the country have been able to achieve.
Right, good to know. Reverend Joe, before we talk further about your organization, could you tell us a bit about your thoughts with regard to why hunger remains a persistent global challenge?
Well, thank you for asking that question. You know, I think one of the things that we have to do is keep raising awareness. There are so many things going on around the world. Whether you live in Korea, in the United States, in Europe, we know that there's so much going on around the world. And sometimes hunger is one of those hidden or unspoken injustices and issues of pain that exist around the world. And we have to keep shining the light around the world. So the reality of hunger is that it is a worldwide problem. Even as I speak to you right now, more than 780 million people around the world experience variety issues of hunger even as we speak. In 51 countries, more than 40 million people are experiencing acute levels of hunger and malnutrition. And sadly and tragically, it also impacts, most of all, women and children around the world. So why does it continue to persist? The reasons are multifaceted. Certainly issues of climate change, issues of injustice and corruption, certainly the effects of pandemic and the global pandemic, and now conflict in various places around the world, including Ukraine, have contributed to rising amounts of hunger around the world.
And that being said, Reverend, what can ordinary people like myself do to ease global hunger, do you think?
Thank you again for that question, because the last thing that I want to do is overwhelm people with statistics. The average person might be listening to this interview and feel like they're overwhelmed. The reality is a single person cannot change the entire world or fix everything, but all of us can do our part. And so it begins with awareness. Let's continue to learn. As you're watching this interview, don't let this be the end of your education. Let's continue to learn about hunger issues in our cities, in our nation, and also around the world. We would also encourage people to partner with their trusted direct relief organizations. Be generous with your resources. But in addition to giving of our own generosity, we want to encourage people to raise their voices and urge their lawmakers in their respective country, asking their country to do their part to help end hunger around the world. One great example, I think, is Korea. As you know, Korea 60 years ago was a nation ravaged by war and conflict. 60% of that country was living in extreme poverty. And as a result of just tremendous development in the country, but also our nation, Korea, received support from others, we are now a significant contributing nation to the fight against hunger around the world.
Reverend Joe, you have a book titled Overrated. Are we more in love with the idea of changing the world rather than actually changing the world? What is your response?
Well, you know, the answer is mixed. I am encouraged by the fact that people want to make a difference. So let's stop there for a second and affirm that good quality among our humanity. I'm grateful that we live in a world, in a society where people do want to make a difference. But in a culture that's driven oftentimes by projection, how we look and how we appear to others, in a culture driven by social media, there's a temptation to look a certain way and not do the hard, persistent marathon work of mercy, of justice, and compassion. And so I want to encourage everyone to not just live for themselves, but ask the question, how can we bless our neighbors? How can we bless those who are less fortunate than we are? How can we partner with others to create a more just, compassionate, and beautiful world?
Reverend Joe, this is an impromptu question. You also have another book. It's titled Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk. I think your titles are very catchy. There's some great food for thought right there. Could you tell us a bit about that particular book as well?
Yes. So the title, the subtitle is Thou Shalt Not Be a Jerk, A Christian's Guide to Engaging Politics. I think we're living in a world right now, whether you approach life from a faith or a non-faith lens, where politics has become the main means by which people see themselves, see others, and see the world. There's a danger when political affiliation becomes our main tribal identity. And so this book is an attempt, an imperfect attempt by me as a pastor, trying to encourage Christians, but really anyone that wants to have a listening ear, how to better navigate the world of politics. We know that politics matter because it shapes policies, and policies ultimately impact people. And more often than not in the political process, it's usually the strong, the mighty, or the wealthy who get their voices heard. And I want to encourage people to make sure that we exercise our voice to also advocate not just for ourselves, but to advocate for others who in an unjust world may not have their voices heard.
Reverend Joe, I understand you also have roots up north, in North Korea that is. Has this particular reality had an impact, a significant impact that is, on your dedication to easing the plight of people in general?
Very much so. As I shared earlier, my father was born in a small little village outside of a larger city called Pyongyang, the capital city now of North Korea. It's really interesting because when people ask my father, who's now 87 years old, where he was born, his response is Korea. And when they ask North or South, it takes him a few moments to understand the question because, as many of your listeners know, back during my father's generation, there was only one country that was eventually severed by war and separated. The stories that he shares are incredulous. There are moments he shares that he had to pull out grass from the ground in order to consume it to satisfy hunger pangs. That as a young boy, one of his jobs was to go around the garbage cans outside restaurants and to collect eggshells. And he would collect hundreds of used eggshells and give it to my grandmother, who would grind it for hours, if not days, into fine powder. And she would then pour it into boiling water so that her 7 children could have access to calcium through the eggshells. And so these stories have been very impactful to my calling and conviction. And here's the tragedy of it all. The tragedy is that these stories that I share are not just stories of my father from 70 plus years ago. These are also stories that are happening around the world, even as we speak. And that's the reason why people need to care, pay attention, and do their part.
Reverend Joe, earlier on you spoke about how 780 million people around the world are exposed to some form of hunger. Does this include statistics there in the US as well? Because interestingly, we are aware that there is hunger problems across the world in more of the more impoverished worlds, that is. But what about the states that in the US?
Absolutely. It does include the United States. Some of our latest research shows that approximately 40 million Americans here in the United States, supposedly the wealthiest nation in the world, but 40 million Americans experience what we call food insecurity. They're not quite sure where their next meal will come from, or if they do have enough to eat, it's not necessarily nutritious food. And there's a difference between food and nutritious food. And we want to make sure that every single human being has access to nutritious food. And one more thing that I'll share is that it is unconscionable to think that there are 9 million children here in the United States who experience food insecurity.
And keeping that statistic in mind, Reverend Joe, what more perhaps could be done to ease the plight of children there in the US then? Are policies being hammered out to address that reality?
Well, I mean, I think that's the question that we keep asking at Bread for the World, because our work centers around creating policies and legislations that are more dignified, that are more humane, that are more just. This is constantly the work that we are working on. Whether it's something called the child tax credit here in the United States, whether it's right now a discussion around the Farm Bill, which impacts so many people, both here in the United States and also around the world. It is one of the things that continues to drive us as we center certainly everybody, but also making sure that every single child, both here in this nation, but also around the world, have an opportunity not just to survive, but have the possibility to thrive.
And against that backdrop, Reverend Joe, what have been the broader implications of the pandemic that is, COVID-19, and the ongoing warfare in Ukraine on the fight against global hunger?
Well, I wish I had good news, but as you can probably surmise, even by asking that question, there are real challenges. Even before the global pandemic, research shows that the world actually hit a ceiling in the fight against extreme hunger and poverty around the world. It was digressing. It was digressing particularly because of other areas of conflict and because of the rising challenges of climate change around the world. But certainly with the global pandemic and now the war in Ukraine, most folks may not know that Ukraine and Russia, they're considered the breadbasket of the world. They produce approximately 30% of the global wheat supplies. And so because of that, and then rising costs because of inflation, the cost of fuel and fertilizer, what that has all created is sadly a storm that has created one of the worst global hunger crises in the last 50 years. This is the reason why there has to be a sense of urgency for individuals, for organizations, and certainly for nations as well.
Aside from your engagement, well, your lead, that is, with regard to Bread for the World, Reverend Joe, you also founded back in the year 2009 One Day's Wages to fight poverty across the world. Could you tell us a bit about that body, One Day's Wages, that is?
Yeah, so One Day's Wages is a 14-year-old organization, and my wife and I and our 3 children, we started this together. And long story short, we were convicted about 13, 14 years ago to start this organization because we saw with our own eyes some of the injustices and pain of hunger and poverty all around the world. And because we have been so blessed, because we live a life of privilege, because of all the personal reasons that I had shared with you about even my parents' story, we wanted to do something beyond just learning and knowing more about issues of hunger and poverty. And what ended up happening is that as people of faith, we prayed and we felt like God led us on a journey. And for 3 years, we saved, we simplified, and we sold things that we didn't need. And as a result, we started this organization called One Day's Wages. Through 3 years, we saved enough resources to donate 1 year's wages of our own salary. And then we tried to invite and inspire people around the world to consider giving just 1 day of their wages. And we're so pleased to share that 14 years in, this organization, we still sit on the board. We have a tremendous team, but we've been able to raise and invest $10 million in small partnerships all around the world, impacting many, many people.
That's very impressive, Reverend Joe. Meanwhile, on the diplomatic front, Reverend Joe, what role can Korean Americans like yourself play to perhaps better promote ties between South Korea and the U.S.?
Now, I was born in Korea and immigrated to the United States when I was 6 years old. And even though I am a naturalized U.S. citizen, as you shared earlier in the program, my Korean-American bicultural identity is very, very important. I'm also part of communities here in the United States. For example, I'm a member of an organization called Council of Korean Americans. And it's a gathering of hundreds and hundreds of Korean Americans who care about what it means, not just to be a good citizen here in the United States, but also wanting to be active in helping promote good relationships between Korea and the United States as well. And I think that begins, again, by education and by knowledge, and also growing in a sense of pride in this privilege that we have to be Korean Americans. Now, those are some tangible, small ways that I think we can contribute to this important relationship between Korea and the United States.
Reverend Joe, we'll end with a few words perhaps about your future endeavors with regard to Bread for the World then.
Well, I would love to first encourage people, if they have a moment, to just learn more about Bread for the World by visiting us online at bread.org. But this work about helping end hunger at Bread for the World and elsewhere, it's not a sprint. It's not a simple social media post. It's a marathon. We recently hosted a gathering in Washington, D.C. with hundreds of our members from around the country, and our theme was perseverance. And so along those lines, we want to continue to persist in our strategy by urging our lawmakers to do all that they can, but to also focus on all of the key contributing factors, the root causes, whether it's issues of gender inequity, whether it's climate and hunger, whether it's economic injustice, whether it's issues of corruption, and the list goes on. And so we want to encourage people who might be listening to this program or watching this program, again, to follow us and to learn more about how they might be able to partner with Bread for the World at bread.org.
I see. All right, Reverend Joe, thank you so much for making the time to join us live on this program. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and congratulations on your award.
Thank you again so much. 감사합니다.
Right, 감사합니다. And that is all the time we have for this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. Do join us again tomorrow, that is Wednesday.
Hello, I'm Gustav Slamečka, Czech ambassador. Arirang TV is doing its best as a media diplomacy channel representing Korea by delivering current affairs information and news in a balanced voice. Everyone I meet can get news about Korea through Arirang, and we are thankful. I hope Arirang TV will continue to take the lead in delivering Korea's news to the world, and I hope it will be a channel for the world and Korea to synthesize. Resonating with the world, Arirang.